Okay, good evening. Happy Tuesday night from Central Virginia. Life is good out here in the boondocks. At least we're trying to keep it good. Well, the subject of tonight's video is obviously something to do with legislation in Virginia. Yesterday was the end of the time period for the governor to sign bills into law, to veto them totally, or to do what is called a line item veto, to veto it or to refer it back to the General Assembly to fix something. In other words, she said, well, I don't want to sign this bill the way it is. I need clarification or whatever. She has to send it back to the General Assembly. Another thing she can do is, aside from vetoing it outright and clarifying, return it for clarification, is to do nothing. In the majority of states, you have what's called a pocket veto. That's where the governor will get a bill from the state house and the state senate and will not sign it. It just sits there. And then after a certain period of time, usually 10 days, the bill will just die. But in Virginia, the pocket veto has the opposite effect. In Virginia, when the governor does not sign or veto the legislation, it automatically becomes law after that time period is ended. And yesterday was that time period. So she did sign a lot of legislation into law and she vetoed a lot of bills. Um, some of most of them were things that don't involve firearms. So it's a little out of my wheelhouse right now. I, I know she did veto something about people getting their cars towed and mechanics lien. And it was actually a good veto because it gave people more rights rather than just having their car ownership stripped from them. So, on that note, I agreed with her veto on that, but that's not the subject of my video. As you know, in Virginia, she's the most anti Second Amendment governor, probably the most tyrannical governor we've ever had in my lifetime, or at least since I've been in Virginia in 1988. Um, Tim Kaine wasn't all that great. Mark Warner, so so. Terry McAuliffe was not exactly a friend of liberty, and Ralph Northam certainly was no friend to gun owners. But Spanberger puts them all to shame. She's really, really got it bad to get rid of the Second Amendment, and she actually is opposed to things that will actually work to enhance public safety. But enough about that. Okay, she has finished with the bills that were on her desk. The General Assembly veto session where they can override it, I believe, ends on the 22nd. Now, that's one day after the gerrymandering amendment, which she favors, to allow the General Assembly, controlled by left wing Democrats, to redraw the voting districts in Virginia for the federal U.S. House. Basically, we have a 6-5 Democrat majority to Republicans for our 11 congressional seats. So 6 are Democrat, 5 are Republican. She wants to be able to have the state draw it so that it's 10 Democrats and 1 Republican. Not only is that unfair to the majority of voters who would be disenfranchised, but even if you are a Democrat and you live in Charlottesville, for instance, are you really going to be represented by somebody from Manassas, even if they're a fellow Democrat? If you're a Republican and you live in Goochland County, is a Republican congressman from Roanoke going to really care about your interests? This is something that it's a one hand up the bat game that was started in several other states. And people say that it's in response to Texas, but there have been several other states long before Texas who have gerrymandered their districts. But nevertheless, I think the 22nd is conveniently one day after how the referendum is going to go. If the referendum vote is yes, then that gives her more power down the line. But anyway, that's a separate issue. But some of the bills that were signed into law in the last couple of days, they go into effect July 1st of 2026. The first one is Senate Bill 115 from Senator Pekarsky. It restricts concealed handgun permit reciprocity with other states. As I have said before, this is a very bad bill. It's a solution in search of a problem. We don't have a problem with people from other states coming into Virginia who have concealed carry permits and committing violent crime. Just like we don't have people in Virginia with concealed carry permits going up to Ohio and Michigan robbing banks. This is just designed so that it makes it tougher for other states to get recognition with Virginia, and they will in turn not, they won't recognize our permits if we don't recognize theirs. So it's just basically to stick your thumb in the eye of peaceable gun owners. So it just gives the criminals another unfair advantage. The second bill was HB 110, Delegate Laufer and Senator Marsden. That is about keeping a firearm out of view in your vehicle. Well, of course, you don't want to leave a firearm in open view in your vehicle. But this is a problem that was partially created by left-wing Democrats who created all these gun-free zones so that people have to leave their firearm in their vehicle. Now, the bad thing about that is, do you want to leave a gun in your car open where somebody can see it? Of course not. That's stupid. You shouldn't even need a law to do that. It says you can leave it in your locked glove box or a locked console, not a closed console, a locked console. But it has to be in a locked, hard-sided container, and that can be something bolted to the interior of the vehicle or with a steel cable. If your stolen handgun is reported within 48 hours, the potential charge for failing to secure your handgun under the code is waived. You also have an issue in the bill. They didn't mention it here. This, by the way, this information comes from the Virginia Citizens Defense League, ecdl.org. Got to give them a shout out. They're sort of like a state-based version of the NRA, but they're a lot more effective. You don't get better bang for your buck in Virginia, but there's a $500 fine if you get caught. I believe it's a class 2 misdemeanor, and you can have they'll call and have your car towed. So not only are you going to be out $500 for trying to comply with the law, but they'll tow your car, and the towing company knows your firearm, and you got to pay to get your car towed. But these same Democrats voted down in the General Assembly. They voted down a bill that would actually enhance punishment for people who are felons who commit violent crime. So it just goes to show you they don't give a shit about criminals doing crime. They want to clamp down on ordinary citizens. And it's like so frustrating. You know, if they would at least show that they cared about wanting to punish criminals, then okay, you might be willing to have a discussion with them, but they've chosen to not take that path. Another bill is SB 272 and HB 626, Senator Deeds and Delegate Carlson, which restricts firearms at all public institutions of higher education. In other words, if you have a concealed carry permit and a college is not a gun-free zone, I don't know, like I guess Liberty University, as far as I know, you can carry there if you have a permit. This would make that illegal. You could only bring a firearm on campus anywhere, any institution of higher learning, if your firearm is part of a demonstration or like a classroom activity or ROTC or some type of sanctioned activity. This does nothing but create more gun-free zones. And we should know from Virginia Tech what happens, and Old Dominion University not long ago. When you have gun-free zones, people die because criminals know they will not encounter any resistance. Once again, left-wing Democrats with a solution in search of a problem. We don't have problems with people with permits going around committing mayhem. Another one is HB 901, Delegate Sullivan. This is really pernicious because it expands the red flag laws. Previously, you had to have law enforcement or a judge, somebody with a degree of judicial credibility, to do what's called an emergency risk protection order, ERPO, red flag laws. Now it broadens the people who can petition for one to counselors and medical professionals. Now you can have immediate family or household members and intimate partners. It can be even an ex-spouse. So now, I'm married now, but when I got divorced 23 years ago or something, my ex-wife and I are cordial, but it says an ex-spouse. So what if your ex-spouse several years later holds a grudge and you don't even see each other? They can call and say, oh, well, so-and-so did something. And then the judge is going to be hard pressed to not grant that order. So this is something that can be used as political revenge against somebody. It also, people say, well, you can do red flag laws. They're great if they work right. Well, the problem is you're violating the Constitution. And if somebody truly is a danger to themselves or to others, then you use an emergency custody order or a temporary detention order. Every jurisdiction in the Commonwealth has that available. So if somebody's truly dangerous, you remove them from the situation. You don't raid their house and then try and confiscate their guns and then leave them standing there all pissed off. Now they're really going to be dangerous because there's a lot of other things you have in your house or your garage or your shed or whatever that could, be put to criminal use where you could hurt somebody. And who's to say that they would even get all of the guns if they did a red flag order? So this is something that this should have been nixed. The court should have even struck this down. But anyway, if you recently bought a firearm, they could use that as a, say, hey, I saw him come home from the gun store and he has he's got a rebel flag outside of his house or a Trump sticker on his car or something like that. Or he's got, military memorabilia on his porch. Well, then that's going to be one of the criteria they can use to use that against you. It's just, it can get out of hand. Another thing is SB 495, Senator D's. It adds a family or household member, a mental health service provider, or an appointed evaluator from a community services board to the list of people who can petition for a red flag order. Okay, so you're going to have the little short-haired Karen walking around with an orange vest and a clipboard, with her rainbow sticker on her, and she's going to say, oh, well, you're a white male and you're a veteran, you're a danger to everybody. I'm going to put in for an order. I mean, these people, oh man, I'll tell you. But those were what were signed into law, and they will go into effect July 1st. Something that was modified by the governor and returned to the General Assembly, which they have to get back to her by on April 22nd, the day after the gerrymandering referendum is held. HB 217, Delegate Helmer, prohibits the import, sale, manufacture, transfer, or purchase of an assault firearm, which he can't even define it. This guy's a West Point graduate, combat veteran. He should freaking know better. He's a disgrace to this Commonwealth. He's a disgrace to the Army. He's a disgrace to the country. He should know better. And I've actually talked to him. I met him. He's a smart guy. And that's what's frustrating, because a lot of these people don't know anything about guns, but this guy, he was a commissioned officer. He's a smart guy. He knows better. That's why this is so pernicious. But anyway, you can't transfer, import, sale, manufacture, or purchase what he calls an assault firearm after July 1st, 2026. The ones that are possessed before 2026 are grandfathered and may be possessed, carried, and transported. Now, here's what's interesting. They can call a handgun an assault rifle if it has two cosmetic features to be considered an assault firearm, not including the removable magazine. So like if you've got a Glock with a threaded barrel, or you've got an extra grip on it, or maybe a barrel shroud, a collapsible stock, now it's an assault. It's just, this stuff is crazy. It has nothing to do with the rate of fire, has nothing to do with ballistics, has nothing to do with range. This is just cosmetic crap that doesn't have anything to do with the lethality of a firearm. And if you have a rifle, a long gun, you only need one cosmetic feature. So if you have a threaded barrel, a flash suppressor, a bayonet lug, or a pistol grip, any one of those things on a rifle, it's an assault rifle. And if it's a center fire, so that would include most calibers. I think with a 22, you might be okay if it's rim fire or with a pellet gun or something, but I would consult an attorney first, because these things are going to be, a police officer on the side of the road. How's he going to know if you are driving from the range and you have an AR in your truck and you get stopped and the officer looks at it, there's not a date manufactured on it, stamped on it. It's going to have a serial number. If you have magazines, they don't have serial numbers or dates on them, most of them. So how do they know when you got it? Or do you have to prove that you acquired it before July 1st? Or does the state have to prove that you got it afterwards? See how you can go down this slippery slope where you have to prove yourself innocent instead of the state proving you guilty. Magazines that hold 15 rounds, which they call high capacity, but it's not. That's a standard capacity for a Glock. If they were made before July 21st, 2026, they're grandfathered and can be possessed, transported, and carried, but you can't sell or purchase more. So they're trying to say that, oh, it's grandfathered. Well, that means that if you die, you can't hand something down to your son or another family member. Well, how does that work for constitutional rights? Is that like saying, well, you can go to church and have freedom of religion, but your children can't? When you die, nobody else can go to your church. Or you have freedom of the press and freedom of speech, but not for your children. But we're going to let you have it. That's total bullshit. The governor had recommended making any semi-automatic center fire rifle or pistol with a magazine that has a capacity of more than 15 rounds into an assault firearm. She basically, the original wording was a fixed magazine. There's not too many of those around. That's where the magazine, it's like a box magazine that is inside the pistol or rifle, and it can't move. You load the ammunition into it, and it has a spring in it. You load the ammunition round by round into there. It's not a detachable magazine. Well, she wants the General Assembly to change it so that it's any magazine and it holds more than 15 rounds. Well, the problem you have with that is the standard magazine for an AR is 30 rounds, not 15. The standard magazine for a Colt semi-automatic M1911 is either 7 or 8 rounds. And there's some smaller 9mm with single stacks that hold 7 or 8 rounds in them, like Springfield XD or something like that. But a Glock 17, I believe it's a Glock 17, holds 17 rounds because it's double stack and the hand grips are a little wider. But no Democrat has ever been able to tell me, why is a pistol with, say, 10 rounds in it okay, but one with 11 rounds is dangerous? Why is a pistol with 15 rounds acceptable, but one with 16 rounds is all of a sudden dangerous, or it makes it an assault weapon? That's ridiculous. If it fits within the magazine, well, that's standard capacity. Now you can buy a 50 round, one of those really long extended magazines. They call them extended clips, but it's not a clip, it's a magazine. And you can have a 100 round drum magazine. Yeah, that looks cool in rap videos. It looks cool when you're out there, and you put your switch on and flip it to auto, which is highly illegal, but those things jam like crazy. You'll get a double feed, you'll get a misfire, you get a stovepipe. Plus it makes the firearm very heavy and very unwieldy. You're much better off with 2 15 round magazines with you than one of those extended ones that might hold 30, because the gun's going to be off balance and they're not meant for that. But the whole thing is stupid, because if you're somebody with a concealed carry permit, what difference does it make whether you have a magazine with 15 rounds or you have a 6-shot revolver? You're not prone to be a criminal. What if you get attacked by multiple attackers? Aren't you going to want a few more rounds? I mean, people say, well, that's because they use them for mass shooting. Well, remember Virginia Tech. That guy had 2 small caliber pistols, I think a 9mm or a 380, and he had 10 round magazines. He just had a lot of them. But what enabled him to be able to kill so many people was not the fact that he had how many rounds in his magazine. It was that he was the only one with a gun, because it was another one of those stupid gun-free zones where only the bad guy was armed and he wouldn't encounter any resistance. You wouldn't see a guy getting away with that going into a police station or going to a gun show, because there are good guys in there with guns who would take him out. Oh, I just get so tired of trying to explain this to people. But anyway, she wants to make it so that it's not just with a fixed magazine, that a detachable magazine makes it an assault firearm. And there again, how do you prove when that magazine was manufactured? HB 71, Delegate Downey, requires all firearms in a home that are not carried on your person to be unloaded and placed in a locked container if there's a minor in their home, or if you have a prohibited person in your home. A gun may only be stored loaded if it's in a safe that has a combination lock, a coded lock, or a biometric lock. Violation is a class 4 misdemeanor, which is only like a $25 fine. But this is, the governor is recommending, she sent it back, that any locking device that renders the firearm incapable of being fired should be allowed. And ammunition does not have to be stored in any particular manner. But she wants to increase the penalty from a class 4 to a class 2 misdemeanor. So she's kind of halfway right on that, but this thing should have been vetoed altogether. My son has a toddler in the house and a baby on the way. Now, he would technically, if he didn't have that gun with him on his person, and let's say he has it anywhere in the house where the kids can't reach it, he's got a child in the house, so he would technically be in violation of a Safe Storage Act. Well, how do you enforce that without breaking people's Fourth Amendment rights? If you have to store the gun and the ammunition separate, or, the guns and locked up in a safe, and, when something happens, the wolf is at the door, you don't want an unloaded gun. That's called a club. Also, your adrenaline's going to be going like crazy when something goes bump in the night. You're not going to want to fiddle fart around. You want to have a firearm available to you right now. I understand you don't want to leave your revolver sitting on a coffee table with teenagers walking around in the house, but that's common sense. This is going to be an enforcement problem. Could you enforce something after the fact? Maybe, but this makes it illegal to clean your firearm. So let's say my grandson is down for a nap. My son goes into the kitchen and, he takes his pistol out and he takes it out and he's cleaning it. Okay. Well, that violates the safe storage because it's not on his person. It's on the table. What if it's on the table and he gets up to answer the door and the police are there? Just saying. And then it's on are you going to make an arrest for that? Or this stuff just makes my head hurt, because the people who really are the problem aren't going to pay any attention to this at all. The people who let their 6-year-old have a gun in a backpack going to school. You think this law is going to do anything about them? Where they said, oh no, we better obey the law. No, hell no. And then if you have a prohibited person in your house, let's say I'm a felon and my wife is not a felon. Okay, I'm not a felon, but let's just say I were. Okay, now can her rights be deprived where there can't be a firearm in the house available to her? How do you justify depriving her of her constitutional rights and her right to self-defense? See, this is where this whole stuff is just, it's all Bravo Sierra. It's all bovine fecal matter from top to bottom. So it'll be interesting to see what the General Assembly does with that one. Another one that she sent back was HB 229 and SB 173. Delegate Hernandez and Senator Williams-Graves. This prohibits firearms or knives with a blade longer than 3.5 inches in a facility that provides mental health services or developmental services, including hospitals, emergency departments, or emergency medical care facilities, if they offer such services. Well, that means a mental health facility is a gun-free zone. You don't have any right to defend yourself. Now, there's an argument to be made if they have a metal detector and they have armed security and they want to post that as a gun-free zone. Okay, fine. But this wants to add a separate criminal sanction, which is, that should make your hackle go up. The governor wanted to remove exemptions for someone with written authorization from the hospital armed security officers and someone brought into the hospital as part of an emergency custody order or involuntary detention order. So the way that that is written, it seemed like she doesn't want to allow a security officer to be able to carry armed in there if they're bringing in somebody who's crazy. But there's no punishment for the crazy person. I don't know. I don't know. HB 101, Delegate Ballard, eliminates a requirement that a concealed handgun permit be requested in writing, allowing for other methods of applying for permit. Now, this is one where I sort of agree with the governor a little bit. She recommended using in writing or electronically. I can sort of get that with it. There's nothing wrong with applying for a concealed carry permit if you do it electronically or by mail or by person. I mean, it's 2026 now. Oh, great. My power is going in and out over here. The other one was HB 1015, Delegate Tran, prohibits a person convicted of misdemeanor assault and battery hate crime for being able to possess firearms. Well, there again, you're taking away somebody's civil rights for a misdemeanor. That's kind of over the line a little bit. I don't know what the governor wants to do. There wasn't a recommendation listed. HB 702, Delegate Cole, the gun buyback program. This is for basically compensated confiscation, where they want you to turn in your guns. The governor wants it to be a sell back. Well, you can't buy something back if you're the government, and you can't sell something back to the government if the government never owned it in the first place. This is just a way to get more firearms out of private hands and destroyed. HB 909, Delegate Shin, expands the prohibition on the carry of firearms from 40 feet to 100 feet outside of a polling place or outside of a building where the local electoral board is meeting. The governor recommends clarifying that the restriction is only when the building or part thereof is being used as an additional registration site. I kind of agree with the governor a little bit on that one. I would need some more clarification, but that sounds pretty reasonable, because you might have a building where the electoral board meets, but they're not meeting that night. And you could get hemmed up on a misdemeanor charge of unlawful carry. So, I can sort of see both sides in that one. Delegate HB 1525, Delegate McGuire, this is the last one, provides 18, 19, and 20-year-olds, prohibits 18, 19, and 20-year-olds from purchasing a handgun or assault firearm anywhere in the Commonwealth. Well, you're depriving legal adults of their civil rights, and there was already a federal case that dealt with this. I think this was part of the Bruin decision, Bruen. I think it was Bruin versus New York about 4 years ago. The governor recommends that this bill reinstate universal background checks as soon as it becomes effective, possibly on April 23rd. Well, the problem with that is she's misdefining universal background check. When you buy a firearm from a licensed dealer, everybody goes through the background check. It doesn't matter whether you buy it from the dealer at his shop, at a gun show, or at his private home. It doesn't matter. This universal background check, I think they're trying to outlaw private sales. Well, the problem with that is there's already been a judge in Virginia, I believe it was a state judge from somewhere out in the western part of the state, that ruled that the law against private sales, where if I sold my gun to my next door neighbor, we'd have to go to an FFL and have them complete the background check, that was unconstitutional. I don't think that judge has been overturned, so I'm not sure what she's driving at here. But then again, does she really care? Probably not. We're just going through some really strange times in this state, but this is just a step towards more draconian laws in the future, because what they'll do is they'll try and grandfather and say, oh, you can keep your guns, this and that. And then the next thing they're going to come up is, well, you can keep them, but you have to register them. And we all know, boys and girls, what happens when everybody's forced to register their firearms. You can look at Washington, D.C., New York, California, Connecticut, New Jersey. plus other places around the world where that's happened, things get, registration almost always leads to confiscation. And even if they did set up something where it would look nice, that's not going to hold up because eventually their laws will fail. And then what they do is they'll come out with more draconian laws and they'll say, well, that didn't work, so we need to restrict you even more. You give them an inch and they'll take a mile. I'm sorry I went on way too long, but I just wanted to run through there, and it'll be interesting to see what the General Assembly does. They're probably going to give her everything she wants. And then when these things become law on July 1st, okay, how do you enforce it? I don't know. I just know that trying to disarm peaceable citizens who live way out in the rural area, who aren't bothering anybody, where crime is low and people get along, how is that going to make violent criminals in the urban areas behave better? It's not. I mean, it just, there are other bills that, restrict where you can carry, like, you can't carry a firearm in this place. And then they'll say, well, it's within 300 feet of this. And what happens is it's death by 1,000 cuts. They get people so confused that people just get scared, and then they just won't take their guns out of their house. It's basically a way of infringing on people's rights without, you're not confiscating their guns. You're just putting all their guns on house arrest because people are going to be so scared to, exercise their rights or defend themselves when they're outside of their home. Because ordinary people who have, they have careers, they have jobs, they have families, they have a mortgage. They're not a problem, but they don't want to get hemmed up by the system. Whereas the bad guys, they don't care because the system's going to slap them on the wrist. I guarantee you, even though I have a concealed carry permit, if I went and I drove my car into Washington, D.C. or Maryland, and I was carrying a concealed firearm and I got stopped by the police for some reason, and I said, yes, sir, I have a firearm in my car, I've got a permit, they would try and give me more prison time just for possessing a gun than they will with a guy who's a felon with a long record and uses his gun to commit robbery or murder or some other crime. That's how bad the system has gotten. And lastly, we don't have a problem with too many guns in this country. We have over 400 million guns. If peaceable citizens who own guns were the problem, you'd know it. We'd all know it. And who's more dangerous? A decent person who has 10 guns or a criminal who only has one? Just think about that for a minute. So anyway, peace out. Good night, everybody. I'm sipping on my bourbon and Coke Zero. So haven't had any alcohol all day until now. So I think I'm entitled to it. Cheers, everybody.